6, Catherine Delahunty.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker, tēnā koutou katoa.
Order.
To the Minister of Women's Affairs.
Order. I apologise, Honourable Member, and I say, look, members have just got to be a little more reasonable. That question was dealt with. Members may not have been happy with the answers, but always another day to ask more questions. But on this occasion, I've called Catherine Delahunty to ask her question, and to keep interjecting is not fair. Catherine Delahunty.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister of Women's Affairs. Is she satisfied with progress towards her goals of getting more women in leadership and closing the gender pay gap, following the release of the New Zealand Census of Women's Participation 2010, which records a backward slide?
The Honourable Pansy Wong.
Mr Speaker, the report raises no new issues, and that's why two of the Ministry of Women's Affairs priorities are to increase the number of women in leadership positions and reducing the gender pay gap. I'm disappointed at the dismal increase of 8.6% to 9.3% of women in the top 100 listed company, and that's why the Ministry of Women's Affairs has launched the Women on Board initiative. As far as the pay gap is concerned, when I became the Minister of Women's Affairs in 2008, the New Zealand gender pay gap stood at 12% for a decade. Since then, the gap has reduced to 11.3% in 2009. It's now down to 10.6%.
Catherine Delahunty.
Has she had any advice to explain why 24 public sector departments have larger gender pay gaps than the gap across the total labour force, including a massive 39% gap at the Ministry of Defence and even an 8% gap at the Ministry of Women's Affairs?
The Honourable Pansy Wong.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Each chief executive of each government agency is responsible for addressing any pay discrimination within their organisation. The national-led government expects that the State Service Commission to be a good employer and understand that Equal Pay Act has been passed in 1972 by a national government, and the Department of Labour has and continue to provide public and private sector organisations with pay and employment equity tools and resources to assist employers to do that.
Catherine Delahunty.
Does she agree with the Prime Minister that the best way to measure income in New Zealand is the quarterly employment survey? And if so, why doesn't she use this survey to measure the current gender pay gap?
The Honourable Pansy Wong.
Mr Speaker, part of the measurement that the Ministry of Women's Affairs has adopted since 2004 is the median hourly earning between men and women. It is released annually as part of the quarterly, but we rely on the annual figure, and that basis need to be adopted on a consistent base, because otherwise it will be distorting and we would not know whether the gap is closing or not. But in this happy occasion, I'm happy to inform the member it has been closing 2 years in a row after being stalled at 12% under Labour government.
Catherine Delahunty.
Mr Speaker, point of order.
Point of order, Catherine.
I did ask her whether she agreed with the Prime Minister that the best way is to measure income as quarterly employment. She didn't answer that question.
Well, I believe the Minister did answer why she believed that a certain series should be used in measuring the pay gap. And if I recollect correctly, there were two parts to the member's question, and the Minister chose to answer that part. Catherine Delahunty.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker. Isn't the real reason she continues to hide behind median income to explain away the gender pay gap the fact that the Prime Minister's preferred method shows that the gender pay gap is growing?
The Honourable Pansy Wong.
Mr Speaker, the measurement chosen by Ministry of Women's Affairs has been adopted since 2004 under the previous Labour government. If I had wanted to choose to hide behind anything, I would shift the base of measurement. But the happy news is the gap has now been closing for 2 years in a row, but we are not complacent. We'll continue to work on it.
Catherine Delahunty.
Mr Speaker, Why has the number of women on government and private sector boards decreased when the number one priority of her department has been to get more women on boards?
Honourable Pansy Wong.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me repeat that again. It's a very slow increase in the public listed company from 8.6 to 9.3, but we're not happy about that when we want to increase it. As far as the state sector boards concerned, the percentage fluctuate between 40 to 42%. I'm comfortable with a range between 40 to 60% in the state sector. Australia have just adopted 40% as their target. Norway has only legislated for 40% for the public listed company. I think we should be proud of New Zealand, what we have done on the state sector board.
Catherine Delahunty.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Catherine Delahunty.
She hasn't answered the question why the number has decreased.
Order, I think, the member, if she wants to get specific answers to questions, she must get her questions shorter and ask only one question in the question instead of putting two or three things into the question. I believe the Minister did give a reasonable answer to the question. But the member does have a further supplementary question, as I understand it. Catherine Delahunty.
Will the Minister commit to the agenda for change outlined in the Census of Women's Participation and join with the Green Party in a cross-party parliamentary caucus, as they have requested, to advance women's progress inside and outside Parliament?
Honourable Pansy Wong.
Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Women's Affairs has three priorities: more women in leadership, closing the gender pay gap, and also tackling violence against women. And we have this agenda, and I think this agenda has been embraced by New Zealand women throughout the country. When the Chief Executive of the Ministry conducted 52 forums.
Order. I think I anticipate the member's question. Having defended the Minister against the point of order in just the previous supplementary question, I would have thought it behoved a Minister to listen to the next supplementary question, which sure left the Minister plenty of room to give a political answer should the Minister have wished, but to ignore the question totally is not very wise. And so I invite Catherine Delahunty to repeat her question, ask the Minister to listen to it, and not give the House a mini speech what she wants to tell the House, but to at least give some sort of answer to the question. Now, the question was so political, there's heaps of opportunity to give an answer, but I would like to hear some sort of answer. Catherine Delahunty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will she commit to the agenda for change outlined in the Census of Women's Participation and join the Green Party in a cross-party parliamentary caucus, as that report requests, to advance women's progress inside and outside Parliament?
Honourable Pansy Wong.
Mr. Speaker, the Ministry sets its own priorities. We have the government priorities. Now, for example, I have already given. If the Labour Party is not even interested in the answer, but someone else might, they should keep quiet. Mr. Speaker, for example, one of the recommendations in the report calling for 50-50, and I have indicated earlier I'm comfortable with a range of 40 to 60. I think the three priorities of the Ministry is dovetail to quite a range of the recommendations.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's sort of like Ibid to your previous intervention, sir. The Minister has yet to answer whether she or her party are prepared to do something with other parties in Parliament, and reading out pre-prepared speeches about what her ministry is doing does not even address the question, despite, I think, your latitude and invitation to give the member a whack earlier on.
It is frustrating. I mean, for question time to work, and the member's question wasn't unreasonable. Catherine Delahunty's question wasn't unreasonable. It asked the Minister what the Minister was prepared to do. Would she commit to something? And now I'm not going to insist on the Minister giving chapter and verse of what she's going to commit to, but some attempt